Deciding who to pull for in the latest Star Rail patch has never been harder. From a DPS that fundamentally breaks the game by ignoring weakness types, nuking for massive amounts of damage and even one-shotting enemies in the overworld, to a sustain character that not only enables the team to do more damage through his various buffs and debuffs, but also has insane utility and can do major amounts of personal damage. It's really hard to figure out who to pull for, so in this video, I plan to try and help answer this by going over both Aventurine and Acheron in full detail to potentially help you figure out who is more worth it for you. Both Acheron and Aventurine are amazing characters, which makes this pretty hard to do, but I'll do my best to break it down. There are two rerun characters, but we don't actually know who they consist of yet, which means we can ignore them for now and focus on the two new limited characters of 2.1 instead. But anyways, let's get straight into it. For starters, Acheron. I feel like her animations have already persuaded a lot of people, me included. But she has so much going on for her without even factoring in her animations. Acheron is a fake nihility DPS who plays around dealing massive damage with her ultimate. I say fake nihility because in reality she plays more like Argenti if he was a hunt character. Her ultimate is a massive nuke which can easily do over 300,000 damage with a free-to-play setup, whilst also ignoring all weakness types, which means she's not bound to lightning weak content at all. However, it's not just as simple as firing off nukes every turn. Acheron's nihility trace is a really unit-defining one, as it serves as a direct multiplier to her total damage. This means that you really want to try and max it out, which locks Acheron into nihility-only teams. This is both a positive and a negative in a lot of ways. Being locked into nihility teams only is a positive in some ways, as this means Acheron takes a lot of the lesser contested units like Pella, Gwynaphan and Silverwolf. But on the other hand, none of these characters really compare to the Broken Harmony characters we have, which means that Acheron really gets held back by her teammate options. It's also an extremely restrictive trace, as there aren't many nihility supports in the first place, which makes her team building pretty weird. However, I personally think the restriction is a good thing. I believe that every character running the same Ruan Mei and Sparkle teams gets boring after a while. Acheron doing something new is interesting and fun to me. It also means her future scaling will be absolutely insane, as when we get more 5-star nihility debuffers, her damage numbers will skyrocket. Speaking about her damage, she does quite a lot of it. Her damage numbers are pretty comparable to Dan Heng's, who is currently the damage ceiling with Sparkle in the picture now. Her skill damage is pretty okay, doing pretty solid single target and AoE damage, but her ultimate makes everything else look tiny in comparison. If you are a fan of nuking and big damage, Acheron is pretty much perfect for you. However, not everything is perfect, and Acheron obviously isn't either. Her light cone options are pretty slim. You really only have her signature light cone and Good Night Sleep Well, which is a gacha LC, and a lot of people probably don't have it at Superimposition 5. This means that her signature is a huge upgrade for most people, but her free-to-play damage is still insane, so you don't have to feel pressured into pulling her signature. Her E2 is also another major talking point at the moment, as it is a really big increase to her own damage, as she can forego using a second nihility character to fit in a harmony. This is obviously huge for her own damage and opens up a lot of doors team-building wise. It also just indisputably makes her the best character in the game damage-wise, so it's really high value in that aspect too. Obviously Hoyoverse want you to wail on Acheron, and it's definitely justifiable. But you really don't need to spend on Acheron to make her do insane damage. She is extremely good and universal by herself and will only improve as time goes on. I would personally argue that if there was a must-pull for DPS characters, it would certainly go to Acheron, as she basically has everything you'd want in a DPS but does it better than everyone else. Aventurine, on the other hand, is a completely separate type of character, being a preservation shielder, who plays around constantly stacking his shields with follow-up attacks. Aventurine is really strong at his role, with his follow-ups occurring very often due to him stacking it whenever a teammate gets hit. This means he can essentially forego skilling unless it's really needed, making him extremely SP efficient. His shield values aren't bad at all either, with 2000 base shields being pretty good. This is before his shields even get stacked, meaning that he can potentially have over a 3000 damage shield, which I don't really need to tell you how good that is. Aventurine also can build extremely tanky to maximize his shield output without even ruining his own damage. This is because of his trace that gives him a bunch of crit rate for free. This means that building Aventurine is really easy, as simply building defense improves his damage by a lot, similarly to Jingliu. It doesn't take much for him to get close to 100% crit rate, which means you can focus heavily on defense and crit damage stats to further boost his own damage. His personal contribution isn't anything to sleep on either, as he can easily do over 30,000 damage follow-up attacks with just Ruan Mei as a buffer. Aventurine, like normal DPS characters, scale heavily from team-wide buffers, as his damage contribution can go from good to insane with the inclusion of things such as Ruan Mei and Sparkle's signature light cone. Aventurine also has a ton of great free-to-play light cones, with the one from the Memory of Chaos shop and the new event light cone being good options on him for improving his damage and sustain. Damage isn't the only thing Aventurine provides though, as he can give a small amount of crit damage on his ultimate and grants all teammates with his shield 50 effect res. This is really nice as it makes the likelihood of being crowd controlled much lower than usual, being close to 80% less likely with only a little bit of effect res. Overall, Aventurine is a mixed bag. With his damage, sustain and his utility all being super good, he's able to fill his role as a sustain whilst going beyond and realistically serving as a mini sub DPS for the team. He can fit into pretty much every team core and is universally good in all of them, and realistically ends up being a decently big damage upgrade for them too. If you are looking for a second sustain for your account, I would most definitely consider picking him up. Overall, both of these characters are really insane, with both having really high value for your account. Acheron can serve as your main carry, being able to single-handedly drag you through difficult content with her high damage output, whilst Aventurine already has such high value due to him being a sustain, and an extremely good one at that. If I was to pick one, I would probably go with Aventurine, as the importance of having two good sustains is really high, but if you already have two sustains or you are content with the sustains you currently have, Acheron is an amazing DPS to pick up and I would recommend her. However, the real answer here is to just give in to your temptations and get both, and perhaps sell a few kidneys to afford it. Either ways, I hope this video helped with deciding who to pull, but if I'm being honest, writing this script made me just want both more. It's extremely hard to resist spending nowadays. But anyways, that's all from me. I'll see you guys in the next video and I'm out.